recording going. Good. Okay. Just some house cleaning, and thank you for those who've joined over here as well. I know about the tests, and you're getting some gobbledygook in HTML on some of those items, and I'm aware of it. And I'm not sure I'm gonna be able to get anything done with it till summer, so I've got to contact the publisher and do a bunch of stuff. So I go through every exam anyway. And if I see something I like, I'm just going to award the credit. Okay, fair enough. I think there's something in the first time I loaded it was last fall and didn't have any problems. It may have been in the course copy or when the server went down. I don't know. I may have to go back in and reload everything, but I don't have the time. It's going to take me a while to figure out which mouth is lying, or both are telling me the truth when I say, is it your issue or is it their issue, the publishers? So it'll take me some time, but I know it's an inconvenience. I apologize, and I'll make sure no child is harmed or left behind as we do this. So no need to worry about it. But we are going to work on chapter 10 in the lunches database. And so we're working ahead, as I said we would be. And we're working to that point where I'll be able to turn you loose on some projects. So I want to find lunches database 9. So it's going to be lunches database 10, and it's all the way down here in the Patrick text in week 9. But you're going to find it's B10. It's lunches database 10. That's chapter 10. So I think it's more row functions that we're continuing on, and that's what make sure that it's using row functions, so it's more of that. Then we'll start to work with some column functions that allow us to do some grouping. So what you will want to do is to go into the files section and get the Patrick materials, download it to your desktop, and then open up chapter 10. So I've got that stuff down there already. So I'm going to just let's open this up, and I'm going to get SQL Fun, and I'm going to call it where did I throw you? And I'm going to call it Mike Harmon. You can put your last name in 10. And I'm just going to rename that. So that you know it's lunches database 10. I may have some examples up here or some work that I've already done. I'll take a look at you. We can take a look at C. Course resources. There may be some, or you may find some over there in the file section. Now, for example, I'm up in the welcome area, that module, course resources and information, and here is a lunches database 10, an LD10, excuse me. So if something happens or you want to see some different code I've used, take a look. I kind of vary it and mix it up. I don't have one particular set of code that I use. I kind of just play it by ear based on what I think is making sense at the time. So it's over in chapter 10, and we're looking at using row functions. And again, this is where we are taking data and we're performing some type of mathematical operation across horizontally, that is in the row, or a record, and getting some type of data extracted from that. Now next we'll start to look at specialized row functions, summarizing data. That's over chapter 11, and that's when we'll start to work with columns. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to pop down here, and I'm going to open up the lunches database. It's my warehouse, and I'm going to I know I got it. Thank you. And we'll go ahead and start to work with that. And then I want to grab the file from the Patrick materials, and I want to get the chapter 10 file, data. And that's what we'll be working with. And all right. And so we can open up the chapter 10. And what did I throw that text? There's chapter 09, chapter 10. All right, there we go. Now, this starts over on page 361, so let's pop over there. And again, the text gives us some context for what he is doing with this code. And the nice thing is we can also see the before and the after of the tables. And what's happening is we're moving down into that part of the course and working with these where, for all intents and purposes, we're starting to manipulate data. Now, I want to just make sure that you understand you're going to see it. You'll probably start to see some situations where you can take the data in a table and you'll say, I really ought to just export this to Excel because it's easier to deal with, and vice versa. There's going to be some times when it's rare. If you have a if you have an XLS file or a spreadsheet file of any kind, and it's really more like a database, it's a listing of stuff, and it doesn't have computational data, it probably ought to be in the database. And it'll be a lot easier for you to find stuff than trying to use some of the Excel functions to go in there, VLOOKUP, HLOOKUP, all that, and find it. On the other hand, if it's heavy-duty computational, put it in Excel, and it's just common sense. Use the tool that works best for you. Some of you are going to go out and you'll be working with Access or Excel, or maybe a commercial product, low grade with Excel. Some of you might be working with the company that affords or spends the money on high-end products that can do both of these and provide you a dashboard. It's just going to depend on your work environment. But the main thing is to understand that as we start to move into these different specialized functions, like row functions, and then the grouping, which is columns, etc., it's good to know it, but it's not always going to be a game changer for you by any stretch of the imagination. My own personal opinion is that everything is, well, it's going to be few. Most of what you'll have, the applications you use, will be so intuitive it won't be an issue for you. It'd be a lot like your phone is. You know that you have a phone, you got apps, you touch an app icon, boom, it's there. It's going to be the same thing with these types of products. Now, for the people in the back office who develop these and run them and put them together, that's a whole different matter. They're still going to be coding, but it won't be so complex because they're going to be using object-oriented programming a whole lot. One of the things I do on a regular basis is I like to go to places like Monster or other kinds of job boards and just take a look and see, okay, what do people, if they have a marketing position open, what are they looking for? If they have a finance position open or financial analyst position open, entry level, what are they looking for? And what's really shocked me is when I've looked at the financial analysts positions, entry level open, and they want people to be able to code Python, do R, work with big data, and it just kind of shocks me. Kind of going, whoa, we're not even, you leave here understanding databases and you have a foot up. But that's what's happening out in the world of finance for the simple reason there's this thing called fintech, where over in Asia, Southeast Asia, China, Japan, particularly China and Southeast Asia, they have not had a history of a banking institutions. People literally would hide their money in the mattress or bury it in the ground because the banks were just, they're just really non-existent. The Chinese have banks now and a banking system, but most people there are very skeptical that you might show up some morning and your money's not there. The government decided to appropriate or whatever. So they're a little scared. So people like to do a lot of, folks in that culture do a lot of one-to-one kinds of business. And so this whole thing of these apps, and then the use of blockchain as an intermediary, which it's an algorithm, it has a key, and it allows you to exchange money without having to go through using fiat currency or going to a bank or through a bank or something like that. We're going to see a whole lot of that in this country, and it's really going to change the financial services industry far, far more. I don't think they'll even know what's hit them when it happens. It's just fascinating because what's happened is everybody kind of took the problem in their own hands, and they have apps of all types out there, particularly for P2P transaction, person to person, and by using the blockchain technology, which basically creates a mathematical algorithm that has to be solved, and the only one who can solve it is the recipient. Okay, and there's a third party who certifies that that's the case. You don't need a bank. Now, there's some of the stuff in this thing called fintech that people are talking about, cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, stuff like that. I'm very skeptical of that because I'm not, and I think we've seen some meltdowns and some problems with those that probably ought to tell us that we have yet to be able to trust them. It's very interesting, just kind of a side note. During the financial crisis of 2008, the only bank executives that were prosecuted were some folks who owned a small Chinese bank a small bank in Chinatown in New York City. There's a documentary about them on PBS, and they were prosecuted for bank fraud and wire fraud on the basis of writing funny mortgages. Now, as it unfolded, what everyone came to understand was that in that culture, people are so family-oriented and so community-oriented. And what the red flag for the Fed and the SEC were all these mortgages where the money for the down payment didn't come from a retirement account or savings. It was a gift. I got a gift from my cousin. I got a gift from my mom, or I got a gift from my grandmother. And they looked at that and they said, there's something funny about it. There's nothing funny at all. That's just that culture. That's how it operates. And the documentary is really good because it walks them through the trial, and finally the people there were acquitted on all the accounts and all the charges. They hadn't done anything wrong. They just had done things differently. And co-signers, and they'd have co-signers. They'd turn in mortgage papers where they'd have 3 co-signers, which was a little strange. And then the title companies there that understood how to deal with folks from that culture, where I might have 4 or 5 of us who sign on the dotted line. We're not used to that. This country, you have a co-signer and a signer. That's it. 4 people. Who owns the house? Who's responsible, etc. Well, that's just how they do things there. And so that was one of the other red flags that went up. And it ended up all the charges against them were dismissed. But as I watched that documentary, I thought a lot. This tells me a whole lot about how people do things over there, and especially the fact that they use phones far more than they do any other device to access and do their work. So we're going to see this whole thing coming. So the little bit of experience that you get working with some code here, like some SQL, is a good thing for you. And some of you may be hacking some stuff like that on your own now. If you do, good for you. I think what's going to be the greatest change for you is going to be operating with a multiplicity of devices and trying to find some kind of tool that lets you get spreadsheets and lets you get databases combined as one product in a highly intuitive environment. Well, all that being said, we're going to work on these specialized rows, and if we look there at 10.2, let's click on it. I think we're probably going to get an error message on that, but maybe we won't. This is we're going to select the current user as the user, and we're going to create the format lessons there. So that's going to create the problem. And let me look at that for just a second, because that was one I looked at and I said, no, I don't like that one because it doesn't. Okay. We should get a good read on this. So let's try it. I'm afraid the format now is going to throw us. So go ahead and copy that and let's see what we get. And so we'll go in and we're going to click create. Okay. And we'll do the query design now. We'll just go ahead and add that in. I think the format, that command is going to kill us. Maybe not. Yeah, the format did it to us. Let's skip 10.2 because that's not going to work. I hate that. 10.3, okay, is one that we can work with. And if you look, it's over on page 367. So let's look at 10.3. It's going to introduce a new function to us, and that's the NZ function. Now, the NZ function converts null data to another value. In other words, it gets rid of the null. So that's what the NZ is all about. And in this 10.3, we're going to select a primary key. And then we're going to make sure that we don't have any null values. And we're going to grab those from section SEC 10003. So let's copy that and throw it in query. And we'll run it. And there we go. All it did is the NZ eliminated any null data. It eliminated null data in what was called the number column 02. You'll see it's got something in there. Then the text column 2, and then the date column, and it provides us literals that we put in there. Okay? You said, what good would it be other than that? Well, if I want to make sure that I don't have null values, let's say I had a form that people were filling out, and I'm feeding it in, and I'm taking that form they filled out. Let's say they've done it physically, and so I hand it to someone who codes it in, and they leave blanks. Well, now you have a null data, but then you decide, okay, we're going to use a literal, we're going to use a flag that says, it gives us something, so we don't have that null value and the ambiguity that it creates when we work with the data. So that's what we're doing there. And we're working with row functions because we're just saying on each row, we're not going to have any null values. Got it? Okay. Now, right now, you know more SQL or SQL or MySQL than 98% of the people on planet Earth. Yes, that's really true. Okay. But it's good for you to understand. You don't really get it until you run this code and it doesn't work. When you say, I have to make sure I'm sure I'm after what I'm after, and I'm using the code and running it properly. And I'm just going to tell you now, if you go to work for somebody and you get a report with a whole bunch of blank cells, something's not right. And that's the point where you need to say, hey, why don't I have data in these? Yeah, and you'll get stuff that looks like Swiss cheese, and there's usually some kind of problem that's there, you need to work with it. Okay, so that's 10.3, so we're going to save it as 10.3. And we've used that. We've used the NZ function. Now, just parenthetically, over on page is 363, 364, you can see the other row functions as we looked at in chapter 9. Okay. Remember, when we do rows, we're doing operations, mathematical, or doing Boolean operations, or we're doing function operations. The NZ is a straight function operation. It just fills something in with a literal. That's all it does. So we've got 10.3. And they show you the beginning table there at the bottom of 367, and then the starting, then the end result table. And this is their method 1. Then they show us, this is over on page 368, they show you another where the replacement value is a text. And they're using a literal. If you watch, there's no point to run unless you really do feel like, if you want to use the wrist power to do it, go ahead. But let's look at what we got. We're going to select a primary key. Then we're going to use the NZ, no null. And then that table, in that column called num underscore call, we're going to put in the literal, and that's no number as, and then we use a column alias. And we just repeat that for text and no date from. That's how you should do it so that it's clear what is missing. Now, you say, I'm looking at this and I see num call, text call, date call. All right. And then I've got these aliases that I use. Those aliases could have been, who are the Three Stooges? There's Moe and Curly and who? Larry? So you could put as Larry, Moe, and Curly for the alias. That's that as. An alias is designed to two things. One, it's designed to make certain that someone can't identify the columns that you actually have in your table. Or number two, to telegraph the meaning of what's there to an end user. Or three, I guess, would be both. So we've got those, we've got that done. Now we come over to task 4, and let's look at it. It's over on page 370, and then we have this beginning table. We've got the primary key, we've got text 1, text 2, then we have some numbers, okay? And we're going to do some addition. Now, if you look up across, up in the middle of 370, you're going to see what appears to be some pretty innocent kinds of row functions where I'm doing some adding and subtracting and multiplying and dividing. Well, they show us the beginning table. They show us the correct result if you use Oracle. But in the access, the table, it's incorrect. Okay? And so you have to come back, and you have to, if you're dealing with integers, okay, then you're going to have to use the cint function, which converts characters to numbers, and you'll see that at the top, page 371. So let's go look at the text here, and we'll see if we can find that 10.4. There's the key, and then this is the correct one. And notice what's going on. You see the CINT, that says we're converting that to an integer. If it's not an integer, what we'll get, the gobbledygook we get at the bottom of page 370 is an access issue that the code, the machine will simply not read a plus sign as a positive sign or a sign of addition unless you define a number in there. Even if you put a number in there and you call a variable character, it won't add it up. So that's why you get the errors. So to correct that error, you have to use the cint, that's the conversion to an integer. And we'll go ahead and we'll just run that in. That's going to be 10.4 anyway, so we'll do click create. And design SQL. You probably won't run into that issue too often. And there we are. Okay? And the correct answers are there. That's all it's about 10.4. Remember, we're working across, and when we started the course, you said we were going to be able to see how this fits in terms of this analytic cube you showed us. True. We're not there yet. Once we get the column functions plugged in, and then once we learn how to tie tables together using a referential integrity, then we start to get that effect, because we just take those tables and we layer them one after other, and then we just start drilling down across using row functions, down using column functions, tying all those tables together, and that's when we start to get the kinds of results that we're after in terms of a better picture of transactions, a better picture of quality of inventory, anything like that. It's the law of large numbers, frankly. And all this is about is, if I want to catch a shark, I don't go to Lake Texoma. I want to catch a shark, or go to the Gulf of Mexico, or go to the Atlantic Ocean, probably the Pacific better, or Gulf. I don't go to Lake Texoma. Okay? So if I want to get really, really powerful data that give me some insights on my customers or insights on my transactions, I've got to leverage the law of large numbers. And the only way I can do that is when I build referential integrity into those tables and they operate like that. So if you go to work for somebody and they can produce you all kinds of sales reports and graphics that will let you see things, you have hit the jackpot. Right now, the thing we struggle with is taking all of this extra data we have and converting it into something we can use. You said, what do you mean? Let's take Facebook likes, and I sell, I sell Cadillacs, and I'm interested in how people are responding to my new model, the XLS4. Okay, now I can look at the advertisements. I see it on TV, and it doesn't show, mom and pop headed over to Furs to have a fisherman's feast or something. It doesn't show grandma bringing presents for you, or it doesn't show us headed off to the dentist, or there's nobody with purple hair or anything like that. It's all these young girls are out on the town running around, giggling and driving this $50,000 car. I can say this: if it was my girl and she hasn't paid for that car, she ain't driving it unless I'm with her. Not a 50 grand car. Those things loaded are 50, 60,000 bucks, but they're being marketed because they're a smaller SUV and they're really pretty, but they're nice cars. Okay. But the profile, who would buy that? Okay. Who would appeal to that? But one of the things that's clever is this, is they're not selling them, they're leasing them. And they can lease them far cheaper than they can sell them. And then they'll cycle the cars out after a 3-year lease if somebody turns it in, and they'll take them and sell them. So that's what's going on here with the rows, the columns, referential integrity. We pull that together and we start to get some really rich pictures of what's going on. It's interesting because Cadillac runs 3 or 4 of those commercials, and I notice that they have some looks like some slight variations in maybe their college students. If you're driving an XL4 and go to school, XL4 Cadillac, and you come to school here, I don't ever want to hear you complain about tuition. Don't even say a word. But then they have some young professionals, it looks like they're working. So I'm thinking, okay, who's their core audience? And they're trying to find them, obviously, to see who will respond. Okay, so we've done 10.4, and we've converted those using that conversion. And then over on page 373, the authors give you some good information in terms of the documentation tools that are available, okay, in Oracle, and then the documentation in Access. And it's, as usual, they say press F1 to launch the online help key. That sounds a lot like Microsoft. Why bury the help in the application when I can make you go out to a website and dig around for 3 hours before you find it? Okay, but that's just Microsoft. That's how they do business. Oracle bakes it in. And you say, well, and let me say this: you can go in and examine each of these, but they provide you documentation on the row functions. This is a lot like rounding functions in Excel. Okay. Now, for years, I've taught finance on and off, and I'll tell you, there's nothing that will make you crazier than, if you're taking finance, you know what I'm talking about, than having to use the Excel formula, having to use the appendices in time value money problems, especially use the appendices, where you have to go and interpolate the present value interest factor for an annuity or whatever, or just let's do it by hand, okay? And let's take it out to 50 periods, and of course it's going to be 1.06 to the 50th power, and that's nothing. I just typed it all in. And so the larger the values get when you look at, and then a financial calculator, and you can have some pretty varying numbers. So this issue about the documentation, it's good to have, it's good to know, it's important, but if you're really all that hepped up about it. Now, someone asked me one time, well, how many digits should I go out? I said, well, I go 2 if I'm doing money, maybe 3 if I'm doing some research. And the student said, well, and this used to be a math professor, and she said, well, Dr. So-and-so says we should go out 4 digits, which is fine, okay? But if you do that on a large amount of money or a large figure, it can give you some different results than what you get if you stopped at pennies, if you stopped at 2 decimal points. And it doesn't sound like a lot but when you start looking at large numbers, it becomes kind of an issue. Well, over on page 375 comes my least favorite part of the course, and this is an application that I think comes from a place called Hades, I'll be kind, and that's the Access Expression Builder. I absolutely hate this. It is, in my mind, the worst, absolutely worst design thing Microsoft has ever done. Then wait here a minute or two, and I'll tell you how I feel about it. Okay, well, we click Create on the ribbon, so let's click Create. And then we click Query Design. Okay, so we click Create, and then let's find the Query Design. Okay, and then we click the Show Table window. Okay, and we've got the Show Table, so let's find that. You can see how much I like this because I'm going to close that, and I'm going to show the table. Okay, and I can choose my table, and I right-click a field cell or a unit cell. Okay, so I'll open up that. I'll have the table, and then one of these cells you can see, and then I start to build the expression. Okay. Now there are some people who swear by the expression builder. I'm not one of them. It drives me crazy. I don't like it. It's too much work. What for me works, and this is just me, is I get a notepad, I sit down, and I write out the expression. So if I want to get the square root, I do equals square root and do it. All of this is, now, if you use it and it works for you, God bless you. I'm happy for you. But I don't like it. It's just, I don't care for it. I just don't. I'm just never having and never will. That's my personal problem, not yours. So I'm going to close this query off, and you can have fun using that expression builder. I just don't like it. If I can do it in my head faster, and let's see what we're doing here. We're doing the mid, okay, and then we're going to get, we got a string, we have an expression, and we're going to start in the length. I'm sitting here going, okay. This is someone's ill-fated attempt, my opinion, to make Access more like Excel. And I think what they did was they just added in some functionality that if you use it, it works for you, good for you. Now, over in 10.8, they talk about creating a simple pattern of numbers, okay? And over on page 378, they show you Access SQL, the dual, step 1, okay? And you're going to select n, and 3n is a multiple of 3 from the numbers table. Now, if you look at the output, you'll see, okay, here's the beginning numbers table on page 378, and at the bottom of 378 is the result table, okay? Multiples of 3 to ad infinitum. I don't know. I guess the authors wanted to show us that we could do that and for us to see, and I don't know if you're as excited about it as I am. Let's just go ahead and run it. But I don't get it, okay? If you're really after patterns of numbers, the truth is you're far better off using the random function in Excel or rand between than going through this gobbledygook. The reason is when you use the random number generator in Excel, it's pretty crude compared to some of the stuff that's out there. For a normal human being like you and me, it's pretty good stuff, and it's easy. I put equal rand, and it will either populate up as rand between or random, and they're two different critters. And I choose, and I'm done. These patterns of numbers, I mean, you know, if you want to prove to everybody that you know how to add 3 to everything in an iterative process, I'm not sure that people who've invested in your education are going to be all that impressed. Of course, maybe, you know, if you went to school in about the 18th century and you couldn't do this, it might beat you with a stick. So maybe it's a good thing to know. I don't know. But they're just building this pattern of numbers, and I've written the author and said, why? It's there. So it's like climbing the mountain. Why would I climb the mountain? Well, it's there. So we're going to go ahead and do this. And we'll go down to the SQL view. Okay. And this is going to be, this is step 1, and we're going to do part 1. And let's go down here. It's 10. I think this is 10.8. Here it is. And we're using that table over there of constants. And we create multiples of 3. And then we're going to assume we'll put the right. Well, I guess I'll paste it in, shouldn't I? That helps. Let's run this puppy. And that is very impressive, isn't it? This is one of these things the authors want to let you see it. I don't know. I, well, I'll hold my trap. I've said all I'm going to say. We're going to save this as 10.8. Maybe it's something that has to do with National Treasure, one of those Tom Hanks movie where they've got who's it, the Freemasons, all the secret people and all that junk. They go looking for money. Or I never watched it. Maybe y'all have. Nicolas Cage. Was he the one? Was it Nicolas Cage? I don't know. Okay. Over in 10.9, and that's over on page 379. This is somewhat useful. They have you do prime numbers, and they have you use the mod function, where your n equals is greater than 10 and not. And so they walk you through those beginning tables of the numbers, and then anything that's greater than 10 and not in the mod 2, 3, 5, 7, a 0. And that's the way you flesh those out. That's all that's going on there using the mod function, which, is you divide it and take what's left over. So let's be brave and go ahead and run it. I'm not quite certain. Well, the author probably could cut me to ribbons and tell me about 18 different ways I could use this, so I probably shouldn't be mouthing off about it. He's probably right. I'll just shut up and eat my porridge. I'll run this dude, and there it is. And that's going to be 10.9. So we're doing these row functions. Now, the one possible use I would see of 10.8 and 10.9 would be if you were working with, let's say you're working with area codes on phone numbers, or you're working with zip codes for places, okay? And if you wanted to code them, you could do that, and that might be something that would allow you to maybe pull some data out of a table that you have. One of the things that you may have heard tangentially in the news, this has been about a year or so, where the phone companies were fighting with the National Security Agency over NSA coming in and saying, I want all of the phone calls of this person. Now, the fact that they're making phone calls to Yemen at 1 o'clock in the morning, and then they go to the internet and they do searches for how to make a bomb, they're obviously no one worth bothering with. But if you're one of the people that says, I can't take that risk, then you get the data. And the whole issue about metadata was being argued by people who didn't know what it was. Metadata would just say, okay, how many phone calls do I have in the 405 area code? Well, we have 10,000. What hours? What days? That's really all that they were asking about. Now, you say, what would be the issue? Why would they fight so hard just to get that? Because they know certain area codes, certain zip codes, certain times of day, certain kinds of people tend to travel those pathways, especially if they've got large downloads of data at night. And if you're flummoxing around and you're trying to figure out how do I get into the water system of Washington, D.C., you're going to download a lot of code, and you're going to do it at night because that's the time, that's prime time. Hackers, all these dark site people, all that, in the middle of the night is their prime time because the rest of us are in sleep and dreaming of going to heaven and all that. They're trying to figure out how do I get into the Army's database and find out, or the CI database, and find out who they are. Despite all of these efforts you hear and the stuff you see about Trump and Russia or all the bad people that are out there, usually it's a human factor that turns the whole case. It's the technology rarely does for us. You have to have someone in there working the street, and that's really all there is to it. When they caught Bin Laden, the way they found him was he'd go out at the same time every day, and he would exercise. He'd walk around the top of his little compound, and he was taller than most people, and so they measured the shadow, the length of his shadow, and say, hey, this is kind of a tall guy. Oh, we may have a candidate, and he's in Pakistan where they protect a lot of these people. Oh, we may have a candidate. And then they noticed, and so they put some people in some houses across the street, and they said, they don't use the trash. The neighbors complained because they would burn their trash. Now, when someone moves in and they will only burn their trash when you have trash pickup twice a week, what's that telling you? They either are a firebug or they have something to hide. And they're not going to shred it, they're going to burn it. And so as they started to do that, then they had people watching. But that was the final goal piece for them, was when they saw they were burning trash, and then they started to see known associates. And that's when they said, we probably have him. But it all started with a profile, his shadow, at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon from a satellite up in space. Pretty long reach. Okay. At the bottom of page 381, they have us create a set of constants, a beginning date and a date time. And so let's look at that over on 10.1. And there at the bottom, here's step, okay, we're going to do our step 1. We're going to create a table of constants. So let's go ahead and click create. Now I'm at the bottom of page 381. Now if I want to, I could go into the design view, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to use 10 step 1. 10 step 1. Okay. We're going to do this. Click OK. And there we ran. Okay, and we're going to save this as 10 step 1A. Okay. And then we're going to do the second one. This is 1B. And we're going to insert that into the table of constants. And these are values. And these are dates. And we've taken the safe route by putting the date within pound signs. So we'll click create. And here we go. We're going to append a row. Okay, we did that. And there's our result table. We've created a constant of dates. Okay. You say, why would I use a table that has a constant of dates? What I may want to do would be to set up some reporting dates or maybe some seasonal dates where we start our Christmas sale every year at this date. Yeah, who knows? It's just simply creating that set of constants that you can use. Then you build on that, and this is step 2, where you go ahead and you get a result, the section 1010 view, and you get those days, 24, 25. Okay. It's a lot of work to do a calendar when you got plenty of calendars inside. the up at the top, page 383, the authors, you walk through that using the format, but let's look beyond that, because the format's going to do nothing but kill us. So we've got days, and then notice that we have the DDD, okay, and this calculates the full name, and it gives us an abbreviation. Day, and it gives an abbreviation. The same thing, a full day. And they show you the abbreviated day and the full day there. You say, why wouldn't you just create the table in a GUI and then it populate it with just go into the table, data sheet, view itself, and edit the stuff, or use a form? Well, that's what I would say. And they show you the result table there at the bottom of 334. And 385, they show you current table of all consecutive days. As you can see, and then 384, deleting some days, adding some days, giving a result table, and then you can see the result table off step 4. This is the author just going through some variations on a theme. And 388 showing a hidden column. Finally, he gives us a useful function where you can find out how many days old you are. Okay? And this is 1012. So let's go down to 1012 and let's find out how many days old you are. He tells us he's going to do this, and let's see. And we want to look for 1012. And now, inside the date, you want to put your birth date, okay? I'm going to pretend I was born in 1978. So we'll create, we're going to do query design, and look at that. If I was born in 1978, I'm already 14,000 days old. Is that important information for me personally? I don't know. However, you might be able to use this. Let's say that you had use life on a part or on some equipment, and you had use life in terms of maybe total hours or total days. Some manufacturers will make a product some people design and make a manufacturing product that has hours in terms of its use life. How many do you guys have? Any of you have to have cost accounting? Did you do any cost accounting in accounting 1 or 2? Did you do any work with the makers tables like depreciation or that kind of stuff? This is where this type of thing would be most useful. Sometimes with highly specialized equipment, the unit of measure used to cost out the wear and tear of the use of the machine or whatever that object is. It can be seconds, it could be hours, it could be days, it could be weeks, it could be months, not necessarily years. There's some very specialized piece of equipment. So this type of thing might be useful for you. You'd have to add in the second column, but again, you could use a form to get it done. Down at page 389, at the bottom of 389 is what I called the Amazing Grace query that tells you how old you will be when you've been in heaven 10,000 days. How many of you know the song Amazing Grace? And when we've been there, how many years? 10,000 years, which means 70,000 days, 840,000 hours. What? I'm still going to be eating every kind of chocolate sundae I can get my hands on, and I will not gain 1 ounce of weight. Heaven, I'll lose weight. And I'll have cable for free and all kinds of stuff. And once a week, I'll trudge off to church. The good church will be for the good people. Who knows what I'll be going to? I don't know. I know that a lot of people think they know where I deserve to go. But if you look here, they're in the 1013, they're selecting a date, okay? And then they're adding, and so because they've got that date formatted properly and they're using a number, that's the celebration day. So you get that celebration day. That's all that's all it's about. The celebration day. It just adds, because days are counted in the machine. All that's going on with it. Patterns of numbers and dates. Pricing. If you look at the bottom of 392, well, they access step 1, 1014 step 1. Let's just look at this because it's kind of an interesting little query we're going to mess with here. We'll do step 1. We're going to do some machinations with it. So I'll click create. And I'll do the query design. I'll close it off. And we'll pop that baby in there. I'm about to paste 5 rows into a new table. Okay, thank you. Now, I've selected price description into the section 1014 table from the foods table. So I took some data from foods and put it into this section 1014. But I was selective in that I took it where the price is greater than $1.75, and then I order it by price and description. Okay, so we've got a Boolean, we've got a select statement into, and then we've got a where statement, and then we order it. And we'll go back and let's look up here at the view, the data sheet view, and there it is. And there's our output. And we'll save that as 1014. Yeah. So we added the column to the line of numbers. Is about all we did there. And there's the result set. Now, at the bottom of 393, the authors proved to us that they can not only be tedious, but they can also be somewhat sadistic. And so you see the equation at the bottom, and take a deep breath on that. But here's step 1 to calculate that, the value of that function between 0 and 99. Find the solution to that equation. I know. And they give us the beginning table and then the result table. Let's look at the beginning table because let's look at the select statement, because I think we're going to select n, and we're going to take n times n times n, so that's n to the 4th power minus 91 times n to the 3rd power plus 66 times, looks like n to the 2nd power, and squared from the number 0 to 99, and we're going to order them by n. Okay, if I look over on the page, yep, there it is. Cubed is 3, squared is 2. What's 4? I forget. To the 4th power. Let's do the 4th power. So 10 times 10 is 100, times 10 is 1,000. So 10,000 is 10 to the 4th power. I guess, but a cube is 3, squares 2. Anybody know what the 10 to the 5th power that they would call it? I guess 10 to the 5th. That was exciting, wasn't it? Solve your algebra. Okay, generating numbers, page 395 again. Generating some numbers between 99.00 and 90.99. There's the code at the bottom, the beginning and the ending tables. So we've whipped through chapter 10. Now, the author just wanted to show us that we can do these row functions, and he walks us through a whole variety of these things. And again, you're going to be doing, it's going to be typically, it's going to be computational work that you do with a row, as opposed to some of these using constants and running them and all that business. But once we've worked through row functions and we've got them, then the next piece of this puzzle becomes summarizing data and using column functions. Now, I'm not sure that I care to stay till 7:30 or so, but I'm going to go till 7 or a little bit afterwards, and then I'll beat you up on the other end. But let's take a look there at page 401 and just kind of get a feeling of what this chapter is about, and then we'll be able to maybe run one or two. But right now, you could save all the queries and work we've done, save that as your 10 and upload it for Workshop 10, okay? And those of you out in TV land who may be there, if there's any of you, well, oh my goodness, there's 20 of them. I bet they're having a party and they didn't invite us. That's okay. Everyone who's here in the building tonight with me gets an A. The rest of you, I'm sorry. And I'll probably have somebody come screeching their tires up here about 8 o'clock when I'm getting ready. I came to the class. All right. Maybe they're all at the basketball game. Is there a basketball game tonight?
No,
they're not. They're playing Henderson?
I think so.
Henderson, okay. Do we have a pretty good basketball team this year? Men? Women? Okay, the women's?
They're all right. They might make the team.
Oh, okay. 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 Oh. We've won the national championship twice or 3 times. And then when we were in NAI, I was a kid when we were in NAI, and then when I was my 2nd or 3rd year as a faculty member here, we won the NAIA tournament. When we won it back when I was a kid, that was when the NAIA and the National Invitational Tournament were the top dogs. The NCAA was kind of like this mongrel tournament, and now it's the one everybody wants into. The Invitational Tournament was one, in fact, the National Invitational Tournament was one where you'd have, let's say, Kansas won the Big 8, which was the conference at the time, and they were invited to the NIT, and they'd skip the NCAA to go to the NIT so they could play with the big dogs. And the whole idea was it was if you had a better record than your opponent, you and they still do it here, I think today, you would play a game at your gymnasium, at your home site. So they didn't have, we're all in Atlanta or we're in St. Louis or any of that stuff. Who knows? March Madness is March Madness. It starts soon. Now over on page 401, they're looking at the column functions, okay? If you take a look, they're going to show you the beginning table and then a result table that mimics what happens when we work through a set of equations, particular addition, as we're moving on down. And they show you we slice that table and we pull down to group the data because we're summarizing all the data in a column. And as you would guess, page 403, they walk you through all of the column functions, okay? And then some examples of them. And they give you a term here, aggregate functions or group functions. So you see what I'm saying now is when I can do a row function, and then once I've got that row function result in every row. Then I come back and I pull the column data. And it's that point at which I can take the row data and I can start to summarize it, which means I can do some things like, if you look over here, the maximum, the minimum, I can get the count, I can count the columns, I can get the sum, I can get the average, I can get the standard deviation, I can get the variance. Then, if I want to, also with column functions, I can deal with text. And then again, they walk us through these column functions, the max, the min. And the whole idea is we're setting up that analytic cube so that we get rows, we get row data that somehow summarize or tell us something about a record and every single record. And now then once we have that column, once we have that record, we target the column that we're after, and now we just do that slice right down. And that's what they show you there in that illustration. Okay? And now we're ready to go to business. But this is the time when we've done the row functions, we get the column function, that now is the time that we can take stuff and throw it over into Excel or whatever spreadsheet client we use and start to do our magic and start to take a look at it. We could even run queries on our queries. You can run a query on a table, you can run a query on a query, okay? And you could, as we've seen, we could string them all together. So now we start to see the payoff stuff when we look at the column, when we run the column functions, because now we're creating cells. If you got Excel, if you open up Excel, you're going to find it's got what? It's got columns and what? Lines. It's got factors or dimensions and records. And so now I can go to town and really start to calculate and work with this data. And trust me, knowing the average number of clicks on a website that draws 150,000 original users is powerful stuff. It's even more powerful if you know every single place they clicked and how much time they spent there, and you know their ISP, and you told them, yes, we have cookies, and you get a cookie, and then every time they go somewhere else, you just kind of follow them, and you harvest that data. Then you start to get some really unique insights. That's why if you go shopping for, go shop for something at Amazon and watch. Every banner ad, will be popping up, will be the product you were looking for. You've probably had that experience. That's what this whole thing starts to become about when we work with these large numbers. So we'll be taking a look at those column functions and what they can do for us, like maximum and minimum numbers, counts. So that's what we'll be working with. And what I'll be working with, I'll be showing you when I do the second part of this. And we'll take a look at it. Now, I'm going to download this here for a second. I'm going to show you something. That would be, I wish I had it. I wish I don't. Okay. To kind of put this into perspective, there are a couple of, there's a website called Easy Excel. Go over there and take a look at pivot tables. Okay? And what pivot tables let us do very, very easily is take data, okay, and data that are in a row and put them in a column. Data that are in a row and put them, column data, put them in, it display as row, row data displayed as a column, take the values and put them in, do some operation. The whole idea of the pivot table is to let me take that data cube and just kind of turn it and look at it, okay? And start to look for some patterns or look for something that was unexpected. If you're disciplined in your queries, you'll have an approach that says we're going to do this, 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 and this. I got through this week reviewing a really fascinating article, and it was by a couple of authors who are writing. They did a replication of a study that was done about 15 years ago, and what they're interested in is trying to understand what factors make people engage in C2C e-commerce. Sell to another person. A good example is an auction site like eBay. Anybody buy stuff from eBay? You don't? Anybody? I see. So I see you do. I see a face. You go, I wouldn't touch it. There are other people. My wife saw that. She goes, I'm not wearing dead people's clothes. There's certain stuff I'm not buying from eBay. I'm not going to go buy socks from eBay or any other garments of a similar nature because Lordy knows really bad. But you can buy stuff from eBay and it's not too bad. But it's just doing nothing but facilitating commerce between people. Okay? Or if I have a car, you see, if you think about it and you have an app that will allow you to throw your, let's say you want to sell your car. You want to get the best value out of it you can. You have an app, you put that puppy out there and people look at it and they contact you and you execute the purchase. Suddenly you've cut the car dealer right out of the deal. And you've also cut out any kind of intermediaries. So what they were studying are things that are related to how trustworthy or how confident those people are between when they make their sales. In some countries in the world, they don't have intermediaries to do that. And so, buying and selling stuff is, well, if you go to an art fair and you buy something with your phone, you're engaged in C2C. They may say we're a business, but they're a proprietor probably. But they're looking at those issues of what is it that gets trust among people, that builds trust in what they call C2C transactions. It was really interesting. The people who are really hot and bothered to learn about this are the folks that trade these cryptocurrencies. You guys heard of these like Bitcoin and cryptocurrency? Anybody have any? Okay. Give it a while before you buy any. But they're highly speculative, and it's like people in some countries of the world where they don't have as organized and empowered a stock exchange as we have here. In some countries of the world, people will buy and sell stocks from one person to another. I'll say, hey, I've got 1,000 shares of so and so, and I'll sell you those 1,000 shares at 30 grand for your shares of whatever at 28 grand, and we'll split the difference. And so you're not going to a stock exchange. People are selling stock to each other. Funding campaigns like that. So it's interesting to see the factors that they looked at to say what is it that makes these people feel comfortable doing this transaction. Okay, so lots of interesting stuff going on out there, and it's going to eventually come to it is going to come to a point where a lot of the intermediaries that exist are going to be gone. Just a matter of time. Well, folks, listen, thank you so much. And during the secondary broadcast, the second one, I am going to go through column functions and talk about those, and we'll move on ahead. And did I talk about the glitches in the tests?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Good. Okay. All right, folks. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next week. And for all those sinners who are out there that didn't come up here tonight, it's too bad because I'm going to order pizza in a while, and we're going to have pizza. So, but it'll all be gone by the time you get here. Too bad. I wonder if I'll have someone come right up here going, pizza. I said, well, the guy in the blue and white jacket's the one that got the pieces that were left. All right.